The old Grand Hotel stood tall at the edge of Pine Creek, its brick walls and fancy windows looking down on the small town like it had seen it all before. For most of the folks living there, the hotel was just a place where rich people from the city stayed when they wanted to get away from the noise. But for 12-year-old Miguel Sanchez, it was where his mother worked 6 days a week, cleaning rooms and making beds for people he'd never meet. Miguel wasn't supposed to be wandering the hotel hallways. His mom had told him 100 times to sit quietly in the staff break room and do his homework until her shift ended. But today, the math problems in his notebook seemed harder than usual, and the tiny room with its humming vending machine felt too small. So when Mrs. Jenkins, the head of housekeeping, stepped out to take a phone call, Miguel slipped into the hallway. The thick carpet swallowed the sound of his worn-out sneakers as he walked. He'd never been in this part of the hotel before. The walls were covered with fancy wallpaper that looked like it cost more than everything in his family's apartment put together. Pictures of people in old-fashioned clothes hung in gold frames, their eyes seeming to follow him as he passed. At the end of the hall, 2 heavy wooden doors stood slightly open. Miguel knew he should turn around, go back to the break room before his mom or Mrs. Jenkins noticed he was gone. But something about those doors pulled at him. He peeked through the gap. The ballroom was the biggest room Miguel had ever seen. Sunlight poured through tall windows, lighting up a space that could fit his entire school. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks, and round tables with white tablecloths stood ready for guests that weren't there yet. But what caught Miguel's eye was the piano. It sat in the corner of the room, black and shiny, looking like it was waiting for someone. Miguel had seen pianos on TV and in movies, but never up close. He glanced over his shoulder, making sure no one was watching, then slipped into the room. The ballroom felt different from the rest of the hotel. While the hallways were quiet and stuffy, this space seemed to breathe. Miguel's steps echoed as he crossed the wooden dance floor, heading straight for the piano. He stopped a few feet away, suddenly afraid to get too close. His family had never had much money. His dad worked construction when jobs were available, and his mom cleaned houses and hotel rooms. Things like music lessons weren't even on the wish list in the Sanchez household, but Miguel had always loved music. He would listen to his grandfather's old radio for hours, trying to catch different songs, imagining what it would be like to create those sounds himself. The piano looked expensive, probably worth more than their car. Miguel knew he shouldn't touch it. If he broke something, his mom could get in trouble, maybe even lose her job. But the pull was too strong. He took another step forward. The piano bench was pulled out, almost like an invitation. Miguel sat down carefully, half expecting someone to come running in and tell him to leave, but the room stayed quiet. The black and white keys stretched out before him like a road. Miguel held his breath and pressed down on one white key near the middle. A clear note rang out, filling the ballroom with sound. The note seemed to hang in the air for a moment before fading away. Miguel's heart beat faster. He pressed another key, then another. Each note was different, some high and bright, others low and deep. There was no music, no song, just random notes as Miguel's fingers explored the keyboard. But even these scattered sounds made something inside him light up. It was like finding something he didn't know he'd been looking for. He was so caught up in the piano that he didn't notice the door opening wider or the footsteps approaching across the ballroom floor. "What do you think you're doing?" The sharp voice made Miguel jump. His elbow hit the keys, creating a jarring clash of notes. He turned to see a tall, thin man in a dark suit staring down at him. The man's gray hair was combed neatly to one side and his mouth was pinched tight with disapproval. I was just... Miguel started, but the words got stuck in his throat. "You were just messing with a very expensive instrument that doesn't belong to you." The man finished for him. He had a name tag on his jacket that read, "Mr. Hartwell, Music Director." Miguel stood up quickly, bumping the piano bench in his hurry. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean any harm." Mr. Hartwell's eyes narrowed as he looked Miguel over, taking in his faded t-shirt and the jeans that were a little too short. "You're one of the cleaning staff's children, aren't you? You shouldn't be in here at all, let alone touching the Steinway." "I didn't know," Miguel said quietly. The door was open. "That doesn't make it an invitation." Mr. Hartwell moved past Miguel to close the piano lid. "This instrument is worth more than you can imagine. It's not a toy for children to play with." Miguel's face burned with shame. He knew he shouldn't have been touching the piano, but the man's words still stung. I wasn't playing with it. I was just, what? Playing it? Mr. Hartwell let out a short laugh. That wasn't playing, young man. That was noise. A small group of hotel guests had appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of voices. They watched with curious expressions. Is there a problem, Arthur? One of them called out. Mr. Hartwell straightened his jacket. No problem, Mr. Collins, just a child who wandered where he shouldn't be. He turned back to Miguel, lowering his voice. Go back to wherever you're supposed to be waiting for your mother. The ballroom is off limits. Miguel nodded, keeping his eyes on the floor. He could feel the guests watching him as he hurried past them, their whispers following him out the door. One woman chuckled and said something about clumsy little hands, and a man replied that some things weren't meant for everyone. Their laughter felt like tiny needles in Miguel's skin. By the time he got back to the break room, his homework was still spread out on the table where he'd left it. Mrs. Jenkins hadn't even noticed he was gone. Miguel sat down, picked up his pencil, and tried to focus on the math problems. But the numbers swam before his eyes. All he could think about was the piano. The feeling of the keys under his fingers, the way each note sounded different, how the sounds had filled up the empty ballroom. It had felt right somehow, like his hands belonged there. That night, lying in bed in the small room he shared with his younger brother, Miguel couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the piano. He heard the notes again and Mr. Hartwell's voice cutting through them. The shame of being caught still burned, but there was something else too, a feeling that wouldn't let go of him. Miguel got up quietly and went to the kitchen. Their apartment was dark and silent, his parents and brother asleep. The only light came from the street lamp outside, filtering through the thin curtains. Miguel sat at the kitchen table and spread his fingers out on its surface. He tried to remember where the different notes were on the piano, which keys made which sounds. Without thinking, his fingers began to move, playing an invisible keyboard on the worn tabletop. There was no sound, but in his head he could hear it. A melody started to form, simple but clear. Something he'd heard on the radio maybe, or a tune he'd made up without realizing it. Miguel didn't know much about music. He couldn't read notes or name chords. He didn't know about scales or techniques. But he knew how the piano had made him feel, like he'd found a door to somewhere new, somewhere he wanted to be. As he sat in the quiet kitchen, tapping silently on the table, Miguel made a decision. He would find a way back to that piano, not to mess around or make noise, but to really play it. He would learn however he could, by watching videos at the library, by listening to songs and trying to copy them, by practicing on tabletops and desks when no one was looking. What Mr. Hartwell had said about his playing, that it was just noise, echoed in his mind. Maybe it was true, but somewhere deep inside, Miguel felt something different. The sound he'd made might not have been music yet, but it could be. He just needed a chance. The next morning, as Miguel got ready for school, the memory of the piano was still with him. His mother noticed his unusual quietness at breakfast. "Everything okay, mijo?" she asked, placing a bowl of cereal in front of him. Her eyes were tired from her late shift, but her smile was warm. Miguel nodded, not ready to tell her about what had happened. Not ready to explain something he didn't fully understand himself. "Just thinking about stuff, school stuff?" she asked, ruffling his hair as she passed. "Kind of," Miguel said. He spooned cereal into his mouth, wondering if his mom had ever wanted to learn something that seemed out of reach. Had she ever felt the pull of something so strongly that even being laughed at couldn't make it go away? As he walked to school that day, Miguel found himself listening to the world differently. The birds singing in the trees, the rhythm of car horns in the distance, even the sound of his own footsteps on the sidewalk. Everything seemed like music waiting to happen. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a plan was already forming. A way to find his way back to the piano. The Grand Hotel might have been a place where people like the Sanchez family only went to clean rooms and fix broken things. But for Miguel, it had become something else entirely. The place where he first touched a piano. The place where, despite the laughter and the shame, he'd discovered something about himself that he couldn't ignore. A hunger had awakened in him. And no matter what Mr. Hartwell or anyone else thought, Miguel knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. For 3 days after his encounter with Mr. Hartwell, Miguel couldn't bring himself to return to the hotel with his mother. The memory of those people laughing at him burned in his mind. making his stomach twist with shame. He told his mom he'd rather stay at their neighbor Mrs. Diaz's apartment after school. His mother had looked at him strangely but hadn't pushed for answers. But on the fourth day, the pull was too strong to resist. The piano called to him like a friend waiting to be rediscovered. "I think I'll come with you today," Miguel told his mother as she gathered her cleaning supplies. She raised her eyebrows but smiled. "Changed your mind? Did you miss the vending machine cookies in the break room?" Miguel forced a laugh. "Yeah, something like that." The walk to the Grand Hotel was quiet. Fall was settling over Pine Creek, painting the trees in shades of red and gold. Miguel kicked at fallen leaves, his mind racing with what he would do if he saw Mr. Hartwell again. Maybe he should apologize properly. Maybe the music director would understand if Miguel explained how the piano made him feel. Or maybe, he thought, he should just stay away from the ballroom altogether. The afternoon dragged by in the staff break room. Miguel tried to focus on his homework, but his thoughts kept drifting to the piano just a few floors away. He imagined its black and white keys waiting in the empty ballroom, the notes sleeping inside it. Without realizing it, his fingers tapped rhythms on his textbook. When Mrs. Jenkins stepped out again, Miguel knew it was now or never. His heart pounding, he slipped into the hallway and made his way toward the ballroom. This time he was more careful, checking around corners and listening for voices. The ballroom doors were closed. Miguel hesitated, his hand on the polished wood. What if someone was inside? What if Mr. Hartwell was there? He pressed his ear to the door, listening. Silence. Slowly, he turned the handle and peeked inside. The ballroom was empty, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the floor, and there, in its usual spot, was the piano. Miguel stepped inside, quietly closing the door behind him. He crossed the room quickly and sat down at the piano bench. For a moment, he just sat there, his hands hovering over the keys. Then carefully he pressed one down. The note rang out in the empty room. Miguel winced at the sound, suddenly afraid that someone would hear. But the hotel was huge, with thick walls and carpeted hallways. And this part of the building was usually quiet in the afternoons, his mom had told him once. Gathering his courage, Miguel pressed another key, then another. He tried to remember a song he'd heard on the radio that morning. It had a simple melody, just a few notes repeated. After several attempts, he found the right keys and played the first part of the tune. It wasn't much, just 5 or 6 notes in the right order, but the achievement sent a thrill through him. He'd made music, real music that someone might recognize. Miguel lost track of time as he experimented with the piano. He found that the keys on the right made higher sounds, while those on the left made lower ones. He discovered that pressing 2 keys at once created something richer, sometimes pleasant and sometimes not. Depending on which keys he chose, he was so absorbed that he didn't notice the door opening until a voice spoke. "You're getting better, kid." Miguel jumped, his hands flying off the keys. A man stood in the doorway, but it wasn't Mr. Hartwell. This man wore the dark blue uniform of the hotel maintenance staff. He held a mop in one hand and had a ring of keys attached to his belt. "I'm sorry," Miguel said automatically, standing up. "I know I shouldn't be in here." The man stepped into the room. His name tag read Carlos. He had dark hair sprinkled with gray and deep smile lines around his eyes. "Relax," Carlos said, raising a hand. "I'm not going to tell on you." Miguel stayed tense, ready to run if he needed to. "You're not?" Carlos shook his head. "I heard you the other day when Hartwell caught you, and I heard what he said." He leaned on his mop. "He shouldn't have spoken to you like that." Miguel looked down at his shoes. He was right, though. "I shouldn't have been touching the piano." "Maybe not without permission," Carlos agreed, "but everyone deserves a chance to try something new." He gestured to the piano. "You like it? Playing the piano?" The question caught Miguel off guard. No one had asked him that before. Did he like it? The answer seemed too big for words. It's like nothing else," he said finally. "When I touch the keys, it's like," he struggled to explain, "like I found something I've been looking for without knowing it." Carlos nodded slowly as if he understood perfectly. "That's how it is sometimes. We find things that call to us." Miguel looked at the janitor with new interest. "Do you play?" A small sad smile crossed Carlos's face. "Not the piano. But I played guitar when I was younger. Back home in Mexico, my father taught me." He tapped his chest. "Music stays with you here." For a moment, they were quiet. Then Carlos glanced at his watch. Your mother works for Mrs. Jenkins, right? The afternoon shift? Miguel nodded. She gets off at 6, Carlos said. It's 1:15 now. You should probably head back before she notices you're gone. Miguel's eyes widened. He'd lost track of time completely. Thank you, he said, hurrying toward the door. Kid, Carlos called after him. Miguel paused, looking back. The ballroom is empty most afternoons, and I'm the one who locks up each day at 5. Carlos held up his key ring with a small wink. Sometimes I get busy and don't get to it until 5:30. You understand? A slow smile spread across Miguel's face as he realized what Carlos was offering. Yes, sir. I understand. And if anyone asks, you never saw me and I never saw you, Carlos added. Deal? Deal. Miguel agreed, feeling like he might burst with happiness. That day marked the beginning of something new for Miguel. Every afternoon that his mother worked, he would wait until Mrs. Jenkins left the break room, then sneak away to the ballroom. And every day Carlos would forget to lock the ballroom until after Miguel had his time with the piano. Miguel's progress was slow at first. Without a teacher, he had to figure things out on his own, but he was determined. He started visiting the public library after school, using their computers to watch piano tutorials online. He learned the names of the notes and basic chords. He discovered patterns in the keys that made sense to his ears and his fingers. At home, he practiced on tabletops, windowsills, even his knees, anything that could stand in for piano keys. His mother caught him tapping rhythms on the kitchen counter one evening. What's got into you lately? She asked, both curious and amused. Miguel shrugged. Just a song stuck in my head. He wasn't ready to tell her yet, partly because he was afraid she would make him stop going to the ballroom, but also because the piano felt like a special secret, something that was just his. At school, things were different too. Miguel had never been a particularly good student, not bad, just average, but now his mind often wandered during lessons, his fingers silently practicing chord shapes under his desk. His math teacher, Mr. Lopez, noticed the change. Miguel, are you with us today? He asked one afternoon, catching Miguel staring out the window. Sorry, Miguel mumbled, feeling the eyes of his classmates on him. See me after class, Mr. Lopez said before returning to the lesson. When the bell rang, Miguel approached Mr. Lopez's desk with dread. Was he in trouble? Your last 2 homework assignments were incomplete, Mr. Lopez said, pulling out Miguel's papers. That's not like you. Is everything okay at home? Yes, everything's fine, Miguel said quickly. Mr. Lopez studied him. You know, if you're having trouble understanding the material, I can help. It's not that, Miguel said. How could he explain that math problems couldn't hold his attention when his head was full of music? Mr. Lopez seemed to sense there was something more. Whatever it is, don't let it get in the way of your education. You're a bright kid. Miguel. Miguel nodded, promising to do better, though he wasn't sure if he could keep that promise. The weeks passed, and winter settled over Pine Creek. The days grew shorter, and Miguel's time with the piano became more precious. He'd mastered several simple songs now and was working on harder ones. More importantly, he'd started to create his own music. Nothing complicated. Just short melodies that came to him when he was falling asleep or walking to school. Carlos sometimes lingered in the ballroom, quietly mopping the same spot while Miguel played. He never offered advice or criticism, just listened with a small smile. Once, after Miguel played a piece he'd been working on for weeks, Carlos had nodded and said, Your father would be proud. The simple words had meant more to Miguel than any formal praise could have, but the secret afternoons couldn't last forever. One day, as Miguel was deeply focused on a difficult passage, the ballroom doors swung open. He looked up, expecting to see Carlos, but instead found himself staring at Mr. Hartwell. The music director's surprise quickly turned to anger. You again? After I specifically told you to stay away from this piano? Miguel's hands froze over the keys. All the confidence he'd built up over the past week seemed to vanish in an instant. I'm sorry, he began, but Mr. Hartwell cut him off. Sorry isn't good enough. This is valuable property, not a playground toy. Who let you in here? His eyes narrowed. Was it Carlos? I knew that man was too soft-hearted for his own good. No, Miguel said quickly, protecting his friend. The door was open. I just came in. Mr. Hartwell didn't seem to believe him. Get up now. I'm taking you to security, and then we're going to have a talk with your mother about this. Miguel stood, his legs shaking. The thought of his mother finding out, maybe even losing her job because of him, made him feel sick. But as he stepped away from the piano, a strange calm came over him. Whatever happened now, they couldn't take away what he'd learned, what he'd felt. The music was part of him now. As they walked toward the door, Mr. Hartwell suddenly paused. "Wait, that piece you were playing just now. What was it?" Miguel hesitated. I don't know the name. I made it up." Mr. Hartwell's expression changed just slightly. "You made it up? You composed that yourself?" Miguel nodded, not understanding the shift in the man's tone. For a long moment, Mr. Hartwell just looked at him, his face unreadable. Then he sighed. "Come with me. There's someone I think you should meet." Miguel followed Mr. Hartwell through the maze of hotel corridors, his mind racing. Was he in trouble or not? The music director's face had changed when Miguel mentioned creating his own music, but his steps were still quick and determined as he led the way. They stopped at a door Miguel had never noticed before. A small brass plaque read "Music Room." Mr. Hartwell pulled out a key and unlocked it. "In here," he said, holding the door open. Miguel hesitated, then stepped inside. The room was smaller than the ballroom, but still impressive. The walls were lined with bookshelves full of sheet music. There was a desk in one corner, and against the far wall stood another piano. Not as grand as the one in the ballroom, but beautiful nonetheless. "This is my private studio," Mr. Hartwell explained, closing the door behind them. "I teach a few select students here when I'm not organizing events for the hotel." Miguel stood awkwardly in the center of the room, unsure what to do or say. Mr. Hartwell gestured to the piano. "Play it again." "The piece you were working on." Miguel swallowed hard. "Sir?" "The music you created," Mr. Hartwell said impatiently. "I want to hear it properly, without interruption." Slowly, Miguel walked to the piano and sat down. The keys felt different from the one in the ballroom. A little stiffer, the ivory slightly yellowed with age. He took a deep breath and began to play. The melody was simple, something that had come to him while walking home from school one day. It started soft and low, like a question being asked, then climbed higher, growing more confident. Miguel had added bits and pieces over the weeks, changing notes that didn't sound right to his ear, adding depth with his left hand. As he played, he forgot about Mr. Hartwell watching him. He forgot about being in trouble, about his mother's job, about everything except the music flowing from his fingers. This was what kept drawing him back to the piano, this feeling of being lost and found at the same time. When he finished, the final notes hanging in the air, he looked up to find Mr. Hartwell studying him with an expression Miguel couldn't read. "How long?" the music director asked. "Sir, how long have you been playing the piano? And don't lie to me." Miguel looked down at his hands. "Just since that first day, when you caught me in the ballroom. About 2 months ago." Mr. Hartwell's eyebrows shot up. 2 months? That's all?" Miguel nodded. "And you've had no formal training? No lessons?" "No, sir. I watch videos at the library, and I practice whenever I can." Mr. Hartwell walked to his desk and sat down heavily in the chair. 2 months, he repeated, shaking his head. He looked at Miguel with new eyes. "Do you know how unusual that is? To teach yourself to play like that in such a short time?" Miguel shrugged. He didn't know what was normal or unusual when it came to learning piano. "And that piece, when you composed it yourself, no one helped you?" "Yes, sir. No, sir. No one helped me." Miguel's hands twisted in his lap. "I just hear it in my head, and I try to find the right keys to match what I hear." Mr. Hartwell was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tapping on the desk. Finally, he sighed. "I owe you an apology, Miguel." Miguel blinked in surprise. "I made assumptions about you that day in the ballroom. I was unkind." He adjusted his glasses, looking uncomfortable. "The truth is, I hear people mess around on that piano all the time. Guests who think they can play but can't. Staff who bang out chopsticks during their breaks." He waved a hand dismissively. "I'm protective of fine instruments. Perhaps too protective." "It's okay," Miguel said, though part of him still felt the sting of that first encounter. "No, it isn't." Mr. Hartwell leaned forward. "You have a gift, Miguel. A rare one. And I nearly stomped it out with my arrogance." Miguel didn't know what to say. This was not how he had expected this conversation to go. Mr. Hartwell stood up and walked to one of the bookshelves. I've been teaching music for 30 years. Started right here at the conservatory in Pine Creek before it closed down. Now I just do private lessons and work for the hotel. He pulled out a book and flipped through it. In all that time, I've seen maybe 3 or 4 students with natural talent like yours. He returned to his desk, placing the book in front of Miguel. This is a book of basic piano theory. I want you to borrow it, read it, study it. Miguel stared at the book, then up at Mr. Hartwell. Why? Why would you help me after I broke the rules? A small smile crossed Mr. Hartwell's face. Because talent like yours shouldn't go to waste. And because I made a mistake and I'd like to correct it. He paused. Also, I spoke with Carlos. He told me he's been letting you practice. Miguel felt a flash of worry for his friend. Please don't get him in trouble. He was just being nice. Carlos isn't in trouble. In fact, I should thank him for seeing what I didn't. Mr. Hartwell crossed his arms. Here's what I propose. Instead of sneaking around, you can use this room for practice 3 days a week. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 4 to 5:30. Miguel's heart leaped. Really? With conditions, Mr. Hartwell added quickly. 1, you must improve your grades at school. Carlos mentioned they've been slipping. Miguel felt his face grow warm. Carlos had noticed that? 2, you will take proper care of the instrument. No food, no drinks, no dirty hands. Mr. Hartwell's expression turned serious. And 3, you will take this seriously. This isn't just playtime. I expect you to work hard to study to improve. I will, Miguel promised, hardly believing what he was hearing. I'll work harder than anyone, Mr. Hartwell nodded. Good. Now I think you'd better get back before your mother notices you're missing. Miguel stood up, carefully taking the theory book. At the door, he paused. Mr. Hartwell, thank you. The music director waved him off, but there was a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. From that day on, Miguel's life changed in ways he couldn't have imagined. True to his word, Mr. Hartwell allowed him to use the music room 3 days a week. Sometimes the music director would look in on him, offering a brief correction or suggestion before continuing on his way. Other times, Miguel had the room to himself, free to explore the piano without fear of being caught. The theory book opened up a new world for him. Miguel had never been much of a reader, but he pored over those pages like they held the secrets of the universe. He learned about chords and scales, about rhythm and dynamics. Words like allegro and pianissimo became part of his vocabulary. At school, he worked harder to keep his end of the bargain. His teachers noticed the change, especially Mr. Lopez, who stopped him after class one day. Whatever lit a fire under you, I'm glad to see it, the math teacher said, handing back a quiz with a B+ circled at the top. Keep it up, Miguel just smiled. How could he explain that he was working harder at subjects he didn't care about, so he could spend more time with the one thing he did? At home, he finally told his mother about the piano. She listened with wide eyes as he explained about his secret practices, about Carlos helping him, about Mr. Hartwell's change of heart. Why didn't you tell me, mijo? She asked when he finished. Miguel looked down. I was afraid you'd be mad, that you'd make me stop. His mother took his hands in hers, studying his fingers as if seeing them for the first time. I would never make you stop doing something you love, she said softly. I just wish I could have heard you play before now. You can come tomorrow, Miguel offered. Mr. Hartwell said it would be okay. The next day, his mother slipped away from her cleaning duties for 15 minutes to visit the music room. Miguel played the first full piece he had mastered, a simple classical melody that Mr. Hartwell had suggested for beginners. When he finished, he looked up to see tears in his mother's eyes. It's not perfect yet, he said quickly. I'm still learning. It's beautiful, she whispered, kissing the top of his head. You're beautiful. As winter melted into spring, Miguel's progress accelerated. Mr. Hartwell, seeing his dedication, began to give him more structured lessons, squeezing them in between his paying students. He was a demanding teacher, often making Miguel repeat the same passage a dozen times until it was perfect. Music isn't just about playing the right notes, he would say. It's about playing them with meaning. Miguel soaked up every lesson, every criticism, every bit of praise. The piano was no longer just something he was curious about. It had become part of him, as essential as breathing. Carlos still stopped by to listen sometimes, nodding along with the music as he pretended to check the room for dust. One day, he brought Miguel a gift, a small notebook with staff paper for writing music. For your compositions, he explained, so you don't forget them. Miguel had been embarrassed at first, awkwardly trying to write down the melodies that came to him. But with practice, this too became easier. Soon, the notebook was filling up with his musical ideas. 8 months after he had first touched a piano, Miguel could play pieces that would have been considered advanced for students with years of training. His natural talent, combined with his relentless practice and Mr. Hartwell's guidance, had accelerated his learning beyond what anyone might have expected. But it was his original compositions that truly set him apart. They weren't technically complex. Miguel still had much to learn about music theory, but they had a raw emotional quality that even Mr. Hartwell couldn't quite explain. "There's something in your playing," the music director told him one day, "something that can't be taught." Miguel didn't fully understand what he meant, but the word stayed with him, a quiet validation of the path he had found. In all this time, Miguel had kept his music mostly private. His family knew, of course, and a few of his closer friends at school had heard rumors. But he hadn't played for an audience, hadn't shared his gift with the wider world. That was about to change. Spring brought changes to the Grand Hotel. Fresh flowers appeared in the lobby, and the staff buzzed with preparations for the busiest season of the year. But the biggest change was the announcement posted on the bulletin board in the staff break room. Annual Charity Gala, Local Talent Showcase. Miguel's mother pointed it out one afternoon when he came to meet her after his practice session. "Look at this," she said, tapping the colorful poster. "The hotel is hosting a big fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. They're looking for people to perform." She gave him a meaningful look. "People who can sing or dance or play instruments." Miguel read the poster. The gala was scheduled for May 15th, just 3 weeks away. It would be attended by hotel guests, local business owners, and other distinguished members of the community. All proceeds would go to the Children's Hospital in the next town over. "You should sign up," his mother said, squeezing his shoulder. Miguel shook his head quickly. "No way. I'm not ready for something like that." "Mr. Hartwell thinks you're ready," she countered. "He told me so last week." Miguel stared at her. "You talked to Mr. Hartwell about this?" She shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. "I may have asked him if you were good enough to perform sometime. He said you were more than good enough." The thought of playing in front of a room full of strangers made Miguel's stomach twist. It was one thing to play for Mr. Hartwell or his family or even Carlos, but a real audience? People who would judge every note, every mistake? "I don't know, Mom," he said, looking away. "What if I mess up? What if they laugh at me again?" His mother's expression softened. She put a hand on his cheek, turning his face back to hers. "Mijo, do you remember what your father used to say? The things that scare us most are usually the things most worth doing." Miguel did remember. His father had said it the day they moved to Pine Creek, when Miguel was crying because he didn't want to leave their old neighborhood, their old friends. It seemed like a lifetime ago now. "Just think about it," his mother said, dropping the subject as they headed home. But Miguel couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, lying in bed, he imagined himself sitting at the piano in the ballroom, playing for a crowd of well-dressed people. In his mind, he hit a wrong note and the audience began to laugh, the same laughter he'd heard that first day when Mr. Hartwell had caught him. He rolled over, burying his face in his pillow. No, he wasn't ready. The next day at his regular practice session, Miguel couldn't focus. He kept making mistakes in pieces he usually played perfectly. After he fumbled the same passage for the third time, Mr. Hartwell, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped into the room. "Your mind is elsewhere today," he observed, pulling up a chair beside the piano. Miguel sighed. "My mom showed me the poster for the charity gala. She thinks I should perform." "And you don't agree?" Mr. Hartwell raised an eyebrow. "I'm not ready," Miguel said, staring down at the keys. "I haven't been playing long enough." Mr. Hartwell was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you know who Franz Liszt was?" Miguel shook his head. "One of the greatest pianists of all time," Mr. Hartwell explained. "He started playing publicly when he was 9 years old. Mozart was 5. He adjusted his glasses. I'm not comparing you to them, of course, but the point is there's no minimum time requirement for sharing your gift with others. But what if I make mistakes? Miguel asked, voicing his deepest fear. You probably will, Mr. Hartwell said bluntly. Everyone does. I've been playing for over 50 years and I still make mistakes. He leaned forward. The question isn't whether you'll play perfectly. It's whether you have something worth sharing, even with the imperfections. Miguel thought about that. Did he have something worth sharing? The music he created came from somewhere deep inside him, feelings and thoughts he couldn't put into words. Would people want to hear that? I'm scared, he admitted quietly. Good, Mr. Hartwell said, surprising him. Fear means you care. Use it. Let it make you practice harder, prepare better. He stood up. But don't let it stop you. They returned to the lesson, and Mr. Hartwell didn't mention the gala again. But as the days passed, the idea took root in Miguel's mind. Maybe he could do it. Maybe it was time to play for others besides his teacher and his family. The following Monday, Miguel arrived at the hotel to find a flurry of activity in the lobby. Staff members rushed about with decorations and flowers, and a team of workers was setting up a small stage at one end of the ballroom. What's going on? Miguel asked Carlos, who was polishing the brass railings nearby. The pianist for the gala canceled, Carlos explained. Some big emergency in his family. Mr. Hartwell is trying to find a replacement, but it's short notice. He gave Miguel a meaningful look. The gala is this Saturday. Miguel's heart skipped a beat. This Saturday? I thought it was still weeks away. Carlos shook his head. No, they moved it up. Something about the hospital needing the funds sooner. He leaned closer. You know, Mr. Hartwell was in a bad mood all morning about losing his pianist. Maybe someone could cheer him up by volunteering. Miguel swallowed hard. I don't know, Carlos. The janitor shrugged. Just a thought. He went back to his polishing, a small smile playing on his lips. That afternoon, Miguel found Mr. Hartwell in the music room, surrounded by sheet music and looking stressed. I heard about the pianist, Miguel said from the doorway. Mr. Hartwell looked up, circles under his eyes. Yes, quite a disaster. I've called everyone I know, but they're all booked. He sighed. I might have to use recordings for the event, which isn't nearly as elegant. Miguel took a deep breath. I could do it. The words hung in the air between them. Mr. Hartwell stared at him for a long moment. Are you sure? He finally asked. This is a big event, Miguel. Many important people will be there. I'm not sure, Miguel admitted. But I want to try. The fear was still there, churning in his stomach, but there was something else too. Excitement, possibility. Mr. Hartwell studied him, then nodded slowly. All right, but we need to prepare you properly. You'll need a piece that showcases your abilities without overwhelming you. He shuffled through the music on his desk. Perhaps the Clementi Sonatina you've been working on, and maybe one of your own compositions to close. Miguel's eyes widened. My own music? You think it's good enough? It's more than good enough, Mr. Hartwell said firmly. It's unique. That's something rare in music these days. The next few days passed in a blur of intense practice. Miguel spent every free moment at the piano working on the two pieces he would perform. Mr. Hartwell arranged for him to practice in the ballroom after hours, to get used to the space and the acoustics. His mother altered one of his father's old suits to fit him, staying up late to take in the sleeves and hem the pants. On the night before the gala, Miguel couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, playing the pieces in his head over and over. What if he froze? What if he forgot the notes? What if everyone laughed at him again? His little brother, who shared the room with him, finally sat up in bed. Can you stop moving? Some of us are trying to sleep. Sorry, Miguel whispered. I'm just nervous about tomorrow. His brother yawned. Why, you play awesome. Everyone's gonna love it. The simple confidence in his brother's voice calmed something in Miguel. Maybe it would be okay. Maybe. Saturday arrived bright and clear. The hotel had been transformed for the gala, with twinkling lights and flowers everywhere. The ballroom looked magical, the rows of chairs arranged to face the grand piano which had been moved to the center of the small stage. Miguel arrived early as Mr. Hartwell had instructed. He wore his father's altered suit, which felt stiff and strange compared to his usual jeans and t-shirts. His mother had slicked his hair down with gel, and his shoes were so shiny he could see his reflection in them. "There you are," Mr. Hartwell said, hurrying over. He wore a tuxedo and looked more formal than Miguel had ever seen him. "How are you feeling?" "Like I might throw up," Miguel admitted. Mr. Hartwell laughed. "That's normal. I still feel that way before performances, and I've been doing this for decades." He led Miguel to a small room off the main ballroom. "You'll wait here until it's your turn. Just take deep breaths and remember, you're ready for this." As the afternoon turned to evening, Miguel could hear the ballroom filling up. The murmur of voices, the clinking of glasses, the occasional burst of laughter, it all sounded so grown up, so formal. So far from his world, from his waiting spot, he peeked out at the gathering crowd. There were people in fancy dresses and suits, hotel guests mingling with local business owners. He spotted his mother and brother being seated near the front, a special arrangement Mr. Hartwell had made. His mother wore her church dress and looked nervous but proud. And then, to his surprise, he saw faces he recognized from school, his math teacher, Mr. Lopez, and several of his classmates. They must have been invited as part of the community outreach for the event. Miguel pulled back quickly, his heart racing. He hadn't expected people from school to be here. "It's time," Mr. Hartwell said, appearing at his side. "Are you ready?" Miguel took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." Mr. Hartwell squeezed his shoulder, then walked onto the stage to introduce him. Through the pounding of blood in his ears, Miguel heard phrases like remarkable young talent and self-taught prodigy. And then his name was being called, and it was time to walk onto the stage, to face the crowd, to show everyone what he could do. On shaky legs, Miguel stepped into the light. The lights felt hot on Miguel's face as he walked across the stage. The piano waited for him, its polished surface gleaming under the spotlights. This was the same instrument he had first touched nearly a year ago, the one that had changed everything. But tonight it looked different somehow, more intimidating, more important. Miguel was aware of every eye in the room following him. He spotted his mother in the front row, her hands clasped as if in prayer. His brother gave him a thumbs up. Carlos stood at the back, arms crossed, a proud smile on his face. As Miguel sat down on the bench and adjusted it, he noticed how quiet the room had become. The cheerful chatter had died away. All that remained was expectation, heavy, pressing down on him from all sides. He placed his hands on the keys and took a deep breath. This was the moment. After all the practice, all the hours, all the mistakes and victories, this was what it had been leading to. Miguel began to play. The first piece, the Clementi Sonatina, started with a simple, elegant melody. Miguel had practiced it hundreds of times until his fingers knew the notes better than his mind did. As he played the opening bars, his hands trembled slightly, but the sound was clear and true. Gradually, as the music continued, something strange happened. The room around him, the people, the lights, even his own nervousness, began to fade away. There was only the music flowing from his fingers, filling the space with sound. Miguel forgot to be scared. He forgot to worry about mistakes or what people would think. He simply played, letting the music carry him along. When the final notes of the sonatina faded, there was a moment of silence. Then applause broke out. Not the polite, obligatory kind, but genuine and enthusiastic. Miguel looked up, startled back into awareness of his surroundings. People were smiling. Some were leaning forward in their seats as if eager to hear what would come next. Miguel glanced toward Mr. Hartwell, who stood off to the side of the stage. The music director gave him an encouraging nod. Next was Miguel's own composition, the piece he had been working on for months, the one that held pieces of his heart in its melody. He took another deep breath and began to play again. This music was different from the classical piece. It wasn't as technically perfect or as formally structured. Instead, it had something else, a raw honesty, a personal voice that spoke directly from Miguel to anyone willing to listen. The composition told a story. His story. It began with simple, hesitant notes like a question being asked. These grew stronger, more confident, building into a melody that rose and fell like breathing. There were moments of doubt in the minor chords, patches of struggle in the complex passages. But through it all ran a thread of hope, of discovery, of joy in the simple act of making music. As Miguel played the final section, a return to the original theme, now transformed by everything that had come before, he put everything he had into the music. All the times he had been told no, all the boundaries he had pushed against, all the support he had received from unexpected places, it was all there in the notes. The last chord hung in the air for a long moment. Miguel kept his hands on the keys, his head bowed, unable to look up yet. In the silence that followed, he wondered if he had made a mistake after all. Maybe his own music wasn't good enough. Maybe they had only applauded the classical piece because it was familiar, composed by someone important. Then he heard it, a single person beginning to clap, joined quickly by another, and another, until the whole room was filled with the sound of applause. Miguel looked up to see people rising to their feet, their faces showing something he never expected to see directed at him: admiration. His mother was crying, smiling through her tears. Mr. Lopez was nodding appreciatively, and there, near the back of the room, even Mr. Hartwell was applauding with genuine enthusiasm, any trace of his usual reserve gone. As the applause continued, Miguel stood up, not quite sure what to do. He had seen musicians bow on videos, so he gave a small awkward bow which only made people clap harder. His face felt hot, but not from embarrassment, from a new feeling, a mixture of pride and happiness and relief. When the applause finally died down, an older woman in an elegant dress approached the stage. Miguel recognized her as Mrs. Chen, the hotel owner. She had visited his mother's department once to check on operations, but they had never spoken. "That was extraordinary," she said, her voice carrying through the room's sound system. "Absolutely extraordinary." She turned to address the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've witnessed something special tonight. A reminder that talent can be found in the most unexpected places, if only we take the time to look and listen." She turned back to Miguel. "Young man, how long have you been playing the piano?" Miguel glanced at Mr. Hartwell before answering. "About 10 months, ma'am." A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. 10 months, Mrs. Chen repeated, eyebrows raised. "And that second piece, who composed that?" "I did," Miguel said quietly. The murmur grew louder. Mrs. Chen looked impressed. "Well then, I think our charity event has been blessed with a true discovery." She smiled warmly at Miguel. "Thank you for sharing your gift with us tonight." As Miguel left the stage, people he didn't know stopped him to shake his hand or pat his back. A man in an expensive suit asked if he had considered applying to music school. A woman with a diamond necklace said something about sponsoring lessons. It was overwhelming, like being caught in a friendly whirlwind. Finally, he reached his mother, who wrapped him in a tight hug. "I am so proud of you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "So proud." His little brother punched him lightly on the arm. "That was awesome. Everyone at school is going to freak out when they hear about this." Miguel grinned, still dazed by everything that was happening. "Thanks for coming, both of you." "We wouldn't have missed it for the world," his mother said. "Your father would have been here too if he could. He would have been so proud." The mention of his father made Miguel's chest tighten. He wished his dad could have seen him play, could have known about this unexpected talent he had discovered. But somehow playing tonight had made Miguel feel closer to him anyway, as if the music had connected them across the distance that separated them. As the evening continued, Miguel was approached by a man who introduced himself as Dr. Thomas, the director of the Pine Creek Music Academy. "We haven't met, but Arthur, Mr. Hartwell, has told me about you," Dr. Thomas said, his eyes bright with interest. I was skeptical, I admit. 10 months is hardly enough time to develop real proficiency. He smiled. "I stand corrected." Miguel wasn't sure how to respond. "Thank you, sir." "The Academy has a scholarship program for exceptional students," Dr. Thomas continued. "Full tuition, private lessons, performance opportunities. We haven't awarded one in several years because, frankly, we haven't found a student who merited it." He handed Miguel a business card. "I'd like you to come in for a formal audition next week. It's just a formality, really. Based on what I heard tonight, the scholarship is yours if you want it." Miguel stared at the card, unable to believe what he was hearing. The Pine Creek Music Academy was the most prestigious music school in the region. Students came from hundreds of miles away to study there. "Thank you," he managed to say. "I'll be there." As the gala wound down, Miguel found himself standing in the now quiet ballroom with Mr. Hartwell and Carlos. "You knew about the scholarship, didn't you?" Miguel asked Mr. Hartwell. "That's why you pushed me to perform." The music director adjusted his glasses, looking slightly embarrassed. "I may have mentioned your name to Dr. Thomas, but the scholarship, that was all you, Miguel. Your talent, your hard work." He cleared his throat. "You proved me wrong, you know. That first day in the ballroom, I made a judgment based on what I saw. A boy who shouldn't be touching that piano." He smiled slightly. "I'm glad you didn't listen to me," Carlos laughed. He definitely didn't listen. This kid was sneaking in here every chance he got. Miguel grinned at the janitor. "I wouldn't have been able to if you hadn't helped me." "All I did was leave a door unlocked," Carlos said with a shrug. "You did the rest." Later that night, as Miguel lay in bed, too excited to sleep, he replayed the events of the evening in his mind. The applause, the scholarship offer, the looks on people's faces as they listened to his music. It felt like a dream, the good kind that you don't want to wake up from. His fingers moved silently in the darkness, playing invisible keys, finding new melodies. There would be challenges ahead, the audition, the academy, balancing school with music. But for the first time, Miguel felt certain that he was on the right path. The piano had called to him that first day in the ballroom, and he had answered despite the ridicule, despite the obstacles. As sleep finally began to claim him, Miguel thought about that journey, from a boy touching a piano for the first time to someone with a future in music. It had begun with curiosity, grown through determination, and blossomed with the help of unexpected allies. And tonight, finally, he had stopped being the boy who was ridiculed. Tonight, he had become the boy who stunned everyone.